get really nervous at the beginning, sorry. Okay. Oh, great, thank you for passing over. Great, okay. Well, I'm here to talk about how to actually teach culture. So all of the background theoretical knowledge that Michael gave and the first presentation too about race fits in quite interestingly. In fact, I was asked to teach a Japanese culture class. And at first I thought, am I really the right person to be teaching Japanese culture? I mean, I've really only been in Japan for 5 or 6 years, and I found out that they asked 4 or 5 other people before they asked me, and nobody really wanted to do it. And this was a Japanese culture class that integrated, is that here? It's slow, I see. Integrated foreign nationals with higher level Japanese people. So essentially Japanese people were studying their own culture in English with students of varying degrees of Japanese cultural exposure, including myself. Okay, so I'm just going to flash some key terms on the PowerPoint initially, so just have a look. Some of them you might know, some of them you might not know. Personal cultural perspective, or PCP. Okay, not the drug. Okay, and PCP is going to stay there, as it often does. Okay, cultural ethnography. Okay. ICPV, which is an acronym for Interval for Cognitive Processing Variation, or reflective learning. Sphere of interculturality. A gap, or a moment, or a sphere where there's a gap between what you know, what you think you know, what your stereotypes may be, what you think you understand about culture, and what is facing you. Okay? Learning logbooks. Making learning visible, or thinking visible. Creating a community of learners, or a community of practice based around culture. Organic, authentic experiences. Qualitative analysis. Almost done. Integrated learners. Developing critical connections in your mind. 4 roots of learning. Having academic discussions within the context of culture. And a cultural learning cycle. Okay, and finally, self-determination theory. These are many of the melee or mishmash of things that I tried to put together into a course that I was asked to talk about in terms of Japanese culture as a foreign person, or my perspective. So today I'm going to talk about the context, the issue, the challenge of teaching culture. Okay, I'm going to give a culture definition. Thank you, Michael. You did a great job of setting me up for that. So, yeah, a culture analysis framework, integrated assessments, implementation of those assessments, and the role of the teacher. I also conducted a research study in 20 minutes. There's no way we're going to get there, but I thought it was just more interesting to talk about the course and how it was set up. So, the context is, as I mentioned, I taught 2 courses, Modern Japanese Culture and Japanese Society. The Japanese Society course was combined with a New Zealander woman. So we did it twice a week. I did half, she did the other half. The Modern Japanese Culture course was completely mine. Okay, the clientele, international students from Europe, North America, the Middle East, Asia. I can't tell you how mixed it was. We had Dutch, Spanish, Americans, Canadians, British, Polish students, German students. Fantastic, actually, to be able to teach that. But how to integrate those people with higher level Japanese people, and by higher level Japanese students, I'd say at least TOEIC 600, which isn't really that high. So it's actually quite a difficult thing. So there's my class right there. So the issue, the challenge, sorry, the questions are a bit small. How do you guide a diverse group of cultural learners with immense variety or variation in their exposure to Japanese culture and language? How do I guide you? Okay. How do you build a knowledge base of cultural information that is relevant to each learner? How do you allow students to learn at their own pace? Some of the students had been in Japan for a year already. One guy had done an internship in Tokyo and then came to my class. Okay? And I had students who'd never been here before, had no concept. They had to choose a study abroad. China was full. They really had interest in China, but they came to Japan instead. So how do we mishmash this all together? How do you integrate high-level foreign students, okay, with Japanese students? And they tend to have vastly different skill sets. So that was my question. How do you do that? Okay. But the other major question that I thought when I was planning this course was, how do you academically assess cultural learning? How can I assess how much you really know? Who am I to say what your cultural experience is or is going to be? Okay. And the other question I had was, how do I as a teacher make that learning visible so I can give you a grade? Okay? And there's me, I taught in Dubai for a little while, and I probably learned more from them about culture than they ever learned from me about employability, which is what I was teaching there. Okay, so how do you do it? Well, it's by setting up a framework, and I set up a framework of 5 integrated assignments. Okay? First of all was the learning log. Okay? Students were required to write in their learning log every day. It could be an image, it could be 5 words, it could be 1 word, it could be a full page. I got the full gamut. Those learning log assignments started with me telling them 5 things that they actually had to do. 5 authentic assessments that they had to do. So they had to go to a sento or a hot bath with a Japanese person not from the class. They had to go and stand at the station and close their eyes and just listen to the sounds of the station first. They had to watch people in their natural habitat and give a reader response or a learning log response. Following the 5 assignments, or 5 practical experiences, we got to go to the police. I arranged a police visit, and they got to study actual police combat. And there's no pictures because we weren't allowed to take pictures. I also arranged a kindergarten visit for them so that they could have an educational spot. They could have a visit with the police. They had an individual reflective assignment where they sat and thought about what the sounds were, what the people were interacting like at a station. Okay? And what it was like to take off your clothes at the Sento. I remember my first time, I wasn't quite so comfortable about the culture and the way that it was. Second is reader responses. Of course, I had academic readings, okay, that I included. They were bi-weekly. I had the students take their logbook entries, read academic assignments about particular aspects of Japanese culture. They came from articles, they came from newspapers, and they spanned everywhere from 1960 all the way up to present day. Their job was to create critical connections between what they were experiencing and what was presented in the articles. Number 2 was to concept map or mind map out on a regular basis and to continually update that mind map. Okay, and I'll show you a couple of samples at the end of that mind map, which gets handed in at the end. It goes through multiple drafts. Thirdly is a presentation, or fourthly, sorry, is presentation. Students were allowed to choose during the last sort of 1/3 of the semester the dessert. So we spent almost the whole semester discussing, analyzing, deciding what culture was from their own individual perspective, okay? Having experiences, reflecting back. Okay? Some people stepping 1 step forward, other people stepping 4 steps forward. Some people with friends, some people without friends, some people with tattoos, and some without. Okay? And lastly, the final exam. There was a final exam that exists at the that consisted of everything that we had talked about. Information from all the readings, from all of the presentations, from everyone's mind map. I collected them and then created the exam based on the body of knowledge that we created from our semester. Integrated together. How do we integrate them? Well, in the class, I integrated them in this particular way. So it's really hard to see, but it's on page 2 of your handout. Okay, so everybody comes in with a pre-workshop or pre-class biography. We work through team-based learning and guided discussions in the class. We had a working definition of culture, which we developed. Following that, they were to read the course readings. They were to complete the 3-column reader responses, to integrate that with their personal experiences from their learning logs, which I collected 3 times in the semester. If they had private details that they didn't want shown, I asked them to just staple the page, and I promised that I would not read it. Okay? And finally, culminating in their mind map, their presentations, and the final exam. So essentially, this will be the classroom cycle combined with their personal experiences, reading at their own pace, going at their own pace, presenting their mind map at the end, choosing a topic of their own choosing, and connecting the information that they had gained throughout the semester. So what cultural definition did we find? Well, sometimes defining culture is a very slippery slope. Okay? Yeah, and that's actually my son flipping over and almost killing himself in Nagano. Sometimes you feel sort of flipped over when you're trying to assess culture or define it, and I think that the 3 types of culture that you represented was exactly, well, there was many, but the three stages, yeah, reflects exactly how I was feeling. Okay, so this is what we came up with, 2 actual areas of cultural definition as a living thing, an evolving way of life for people, practices, products, perspectives, and context, or communities that the students all had access to. Some of them more difficult than others. Okay, Michael talked about persons, practices, products, contexts, or communities, I think as big C, things that we see very easily, and little c as the perspectives, trying to understand what the perspectives are of Japanese people, okay? And that traditional, stable knowledge set. Okay? Whether that is valid or real, that is what people tend to see, and that is stereotypically what they had. So we have these 2 sort of prongs. Culture is alive. You have the ability to access it through authentic experiences, but there are also articles and readings and stereotypes that we do need to deal with. Okay, so that's how we went about it. Okay, one of the initial lectures we had was about Japanese identity and exactly what was it. Okay? Stereotypically, what are you thinking? What do you think it is? Why are you here? What is the largest image? What represents Japan? So again, building a shared body of knowledge. You see senpai kohai here, a collective, polite, shy, conservative, Japan, China image. Okay, so quite a large set of perspectives or ideas about what Japan really is. Okay? Personal cultural perspective. Each one of us has it. I'm Canadian. I'm from Vancouver. I have a strong feeling or connection to my own individual identity as a Canadian. One of the things that I asked the students to do was when they went to an authentic experience was to leave that identity behind. To look through fresh glasses without any connection back to your own culture, which is so difficult to do. In fact, it's probably impossible. But to try and limit as much bias as they could. Don't judge their experience. Just have it and be in the moment. Once they finish their moment, once they step across in an authentic experience, okay? Here's an example. This guy from Saudi Arabia walking with a Japanese kindergarten student. Another one, my German students. So they were walking and they got a chance to actually go and plant vegetables at a kindergarten, yeah, that values nature. Okay, so having an authentic experience there. And there they all are, kindergarten. Sorry, no police judo techniques. Yeah, it was wild. As I mentioned, okay, this is the one of the underlying theories of self-determination theory, and it's basically me sort of releasing them away from the tasks. I started with tasks that they must have. Okay? After each authentic experience, okay, students had to go back to their own biography, go back, have a reflection time, have an interval for cognitive processing variation, to actually think about what they were learning, to actually think about the experience that they just had, whether it was an image, a picture, a single word, 2 words, a full paragraph, and I had a complete variety of that. The Japanese students also had to be very cognizant of things that maybe were very normal or innate for them. Why do you say itadakimasu? Why, do Japanese students all line up? Why are certain things so prevalent in your own society? So based on the readings, it's easier to see difference, or to see things that maybe are different. But for Japanese students to see things that are commonplace and everyday, how do they analyze that? Their learning logs were quite interesting and quite different from the foreign students, but they were still able to move forward. All right, so the knowledge was transferred from authentic experiences to reader responses, student learning logs, mind maps, presentation, and then to the final exam. Okay? Just to give you an example, really quickly, this is Moran, 2001. He has a cycle of cultural contact, okay? And his side view, which you'll find on your handout on the 3rd page, only says that you have a chance to contact with difference. But that contact is not enough, and I would agree that you can't just have contact, okay? But it's not only difference that you're dealing with people, you're dealing with experiences, you're dealing with products, you're dealing with communities, okay? And the way that I have changed this was to take this cycle, which he calls just interpretation, evaluation, and I took each one of those and turned them into an assignment. Okay, so I took all of his evaluative tools and turned them into reader response, mind map, academic discussion in the classroom, and logbook. Okay? The X is the authentic experience. Okay? And then essentially you come out with cultural learning outcomes. What are those outcomes? Those outcomes are whatever you feel at the end, whatever you're thinking, whatever your experience has given to you. You came to Japan for a cultural experience. What was the result of that? And I sat down, I had interviews with each student. We had focus groups beforehand, we had a focus group after, and I actually sat down and video recorded interviews with each student at the end. Okay. Here's up close, just the authentic experience. Okay. You have your authentic experience, you document everything. Okay. Then you do an analysis with your ICPV, you connect to readers for articles. Okay. You interpret by connecting those ideas together via a mind map. Okay. And then you come to class ready to talk and discuss. Okay. Then you go back to either another authentic experience, and you can reflect back to your biography, your own personal cultural perspective, and then off you go again to another. Okay. It was interesting to see how different each person's logbook was and the different things that they highlighted. Okay. Some of the topics that we covered was business culture, education, okay, work culture, male-female roles. We dealt with religion and history and background. I had to do a lot of reading myself. The first time I did, I had to do a lot of background. I'm not a Japanese studies major. Japanese culture is not my field at all. Okay, just finally, do you know how much time I have left? Am I getting close to the end now?
You're doing fine.
Okay. Okay. So, what made me think of this? Well, for me, being an education major myself, okay, I decided to combine 3 models of curriculum development together: threaded model and immersion model. So I would thread a cultural framework. I threaded reflective. I threaded learning log writing and de-identifying. The first week was basically me teaching them how I wanted them to learn about culture, the things that I wanted them to do to document culture, to validate their own experience, to validate their prior learning. Okay? There were 3 levels of immersion. Of course, language, it was all in English, and as I said, it was pretty multi-ethnic, multilingual, so we stayed strictly in English, okay, other than Japanese vocabulary that we learned. Okay? Self-regulating learning. I did not push them in any way. If they decided they wanted to fail, they didn't want to write, then they didn't write. Okay? I don't function in that way. If they didn't want to write, it was up to them. And it was also an integrated assessment learning environment. Okay? Their job was to develop an identity within their own experience in Japan, as each one of you have. If I polled each one of you, I don't know how long you've all been here in Japan, it could be 1 week, Could be 6 months, could be 2 years, could be 5 years, could be forever. I don't know if you're Japanese or not. I can't tell. Okay? But again, Japanese American?
Yes, I am.
Okay. There you go. It's hard, it's impossible to tell, right? Okay. So, this is assisted integration into their biography, and then eventually a networking model where they would come to class, bring their authentic experiences, bring their logbooks to class, bring their articles to class, and to connect them together. I would start the discussions, and I would rotate them around, okay? We would then have large discussions at the end about how their experiences, how the readings, how they all connected together. So basically I operated as a facilitator. Did I lecture? Did I have guided discussions? Yes, I did. Okay, on the topics that I mentioned, just give or take. Japanese identity, okay, let's discuss it, let's talk about it. What is it? Let's talk about the business culture. Let's talk about Shintoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, and how they're all connected together and how they influence Japanese society. Okay, so essentially this networking model is how we built a base of Japanese culture with each person reflecting back to their own personal cultural perspective. Because in the end, they will go back to their home institutions. They will go back and take their learning wallet with them. What was the value of their experience in Japan? What was the value? What did they take away? Whether it was a racist perspective or a not racist perspective, okay? Who knows? Everybody was completely different. Some people loved it. Some people hated their experience in Japan. Okay, interesting. Okay, what's the role of the teacher? Well, as I mentioned, my role fluctuated a lot, and I worked all the way from managing to instructing, to mentoring, to coaching, to counseling, to supporting, and to facilitating. Okay? From time to time, based on each student and what they wrote in their logbook, I spent numerous amounts of time writing back to them, responding to what they had written. Okay? Essentially, trying to get the students to focus on I as the subject, not Japanese culture, but me as the cultural ethnographer, me as trying to decide what Japanese culture is for me, what my experience was.
Sorry, could you finish about 2 minutes?
Yeah, oh, definitely,
Okay.
easy. Okay, so research applications for culture, well, there are several. Content analysis of learning logs, okay, linguistic analysis if we wanted. Students chose some of these things for their presentation, okay. They analyzed Japanese language, narrative or storytelling analysis, story analysis, interview, post or pre and writing, okay, and focus groups. So for me, as I mentioned, I had focus groups prior to the class. I had each student come in together as a group, and I was the moderator. We worked on questions. What do you already know about Japan? What is the current identity of Japan? What are you interested in Japan? And what do you expect to learn in the Japanese culture class? I left that with them. And I had them write down, and also I videotaped the moderated focus groups, and I highlighted some of the vocabulary that came out of that, and then I did this very same thing at the end. And if you look, the interesting thing, pre-course, okay, cosplay, technology, manga, bushido, anime, suicide, honor, PlayStation, okay, yep, and the post, okay, analysis, in the focus group we got different, framework, thinking, learning, evaluate, continuous, connected, social mechanisms, so very, very different in terms of what they came up with. More, in my mind, deeper synthesis, thinking out about actually learning, thinking about actually connecting ideas together rather than focusing on, we'll say, the big C or the things that are easily seen, or maybe the impetus for why they came to Japan, cosplay, or whether they came for manga. I had a Lolita. Every class she came dressed in Lolita. Every class. Japan, love her. Yeah, and then we had the other people with no experience, no interest, nothing at all. These are some of the references. Sorry, that was really quick. I actually cut about 8 to 10 slides, so to try and fit into the 20 minutes. That is just one example of a way to integrate a culture class. I found it highly successful. Thank you. Here's an example of a mind map right there.